Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Good morning, Sarah Nandapree. How are you, my friend?
Good morning, Leo. I am good, buddy. It is hot in Barcelona. So I'm like Beyonce today with my fan straight on the face.
I'm really enjoying it, actually. It makes you look more glamorous than you usually look. And you're pretty damn glamorous anyway, right?
Thanks, buddy. I try.
How hot is hot?
It's hard to be glamorous in Barcelona in the summertime. I don't even know why I bother with makeup. Everything just sweats off in 5 minutes. So we'll take it. But anyway.
Yeah, come on, scare us all. How hot is hot? I know it's humid there as well, so temperature's not everything, right?
Yeah, so I think that's the real problem. It's just so humid, and when it's really sunny and there's no breeze, then I want to say it's like 29, but then the real feel is like 36 because of the humidity. So that's where it gets you. And nobody's got air conditioning. So I mean, like some people do, but it's fancy people. I ain't got no air conditioning.
It's funny that it's not more mainstream, isn't it? But I guess there you go. These things will come, won't they, as the planet gets hotter and hotter.
Yeah.
Tell me, my friend, it's obviously lovely midsummer sort of behavior. What's the weekend brought you?
Yeah, the weekend was actually pretty chill. Friday night. So Mal and I are going to Tomorrowland with some friends next week.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And there's 2 weekends. So this weekend was weekend one, and there were a couple of DJs that we wanted to hear play that were playing on Friday night. And they live streamed it. So we had our own Tomorrowland jam at home. We just opened a bottle of wine and sat in front of the TV, and it was great. And then Saturday hung out with friends. I had lunch with one group of friends and then a dinner with another group, and it was great. So yesterday was a recuperate and relax kind of day. What about you? You're still looking, dare I say tan, no longer burnt, which means you probably have stayed out of the sun and it's just soaking it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you are what you're experiencing now is a week of cloud, so it's allowed the burn to become a tan. But I'm looking outside my window; it's actually a bit sunny, so I could be ready to burn again. What do we do? No, my parents were around this weekend, which was great. It meant that I could throw the kids downstairs in the morning and go back to bed for a lie-in. I mean, that was the best thing, right? Oh my Lord, it was good. So I slept in.
What's bad? What are you waiting on? Are you still there just testing?
She's gone. I know. She was desperate. She was that I had to get her out of the house. You know, I'd had my weekend of freedom. I wanted them back out of the house now. No, it was great. I stayed in bed till 9:15 a.m. on Saturday, which is a big lion in my world. So yeah, it was great. And then yesterday we went to a little country house for the day with some friends that live. They live one direction, we live another direction, and we met halfway. So we had a little look around a country house, and the kids played around and all that good stuff. So yeah, I'm feeling the love. I'm feeling renewed. There's something so nice about this time of year in England, because even if it is a bit cloudy and it did rain at the weekend a little bit, it's just warm. It's warm. It means you get to wear a t-shirt and shorts, which we don't take for granted, because a good 9 months or 10 months of the year you're in long trousers and a jumper. So it was, it's a lovely time for us.
Now you see how the other half live, Leo. Nice to see.
That's it. We don't need fans. I don't need a fan. Luckily, I don't have any hair to blow around if I were to have a fan. So there you go. All right, buddy. So we got some good and interesting articles this week. One which is particularly close to my heart because it mentions cabin holidays in the woods. So I feel seen as a holiday booker finally. But we'll come on to that. But why don't you start us off? What have we got? This is more of a low light, I think, to start us off.
Yeah, wow, it's a low light, but of course I've got some gossip for you, which I know you hate gossip, so maybe I'll just keep to myself. But this article breakingtravelnews.com put out, but it's all over the Spanish news. This is just one that we found in English for our readers, just in case. But essentially, there are more than 1.1 million Spanish tourist rental beds, so basically short-term rentals, that could potentially be removed from the market this August. So this comes after the law that we mentioned a couple of weeks ago on the pod, where there is now something called a global registry. So in Spain, always there has been like a local registry for short-term rentals and licensing requirements, either by the basically like the province or the Comunidad Autónoma, which is like the state essentially, or sometimes by local municipalities. And so that has been going on for quite some time. And in many places where it is required to have a license, for example, in Barcelona, for a while, Airbnb asked you to put that registration number. Now, all of Spain has put out their new registration, which is called the unique registration, which is not unique because it's a disaster. The whole thing's a disaster. Because in every autonomous community, they interpret it as something different. So Spain put out what they thought was going to be this new, like, not necessarily regulation, but like a how-to book, which includes registration. So anytime that anybody has any kind of property that they are renting out, including, so mine, for example, that I rent to students, it's registered. Each one of the rooms is registered. Short-term rentals, mid-term rentals, long-term rentals, all of them have to be registered in this unique registry. Essentially, this is the Spanish government's attempt to figure out what they're really dealing with, because oftentimes they don't really have good numbers because there's been no sort of Spain-wide registry before. And they're kind of doing this in prep for, according to what's on the news, for putting out national regulations or legislation that will surround housing in general. The interesting thing about this one is it was a requirement. So they put it out over a year ago saying, hey, there's going to be this unique registry. Here's how you do it. It opened on January 1st. And by July 1st, it was a requirement for everybody to be registered. I did mine in April, so I didn't have any issues. But now, of course, classic Spain, everybody waited until the last minute. And now the system has collapsed. So nobody can register their properties, which means that there's tons of properties that still don't have this registration number. And now the Spanish government is basically saying, Airbnb, we're going to take you to court. Airbnb, Booking, Vrbo, whatever. We're taking you all to court if you don't have this Spanish unique registration. And they already have this license field on most of the listings, but historically that's been for the local license or whatever else. So now they have to basically create a new space on the listing for this additional license number. So anyway, I found it quite fun that, they're going to just remove a bunch of listings, even though nobody can register because their system doesn't work because it broke. So there's your gossip. Classic Spain.
I mean, I love it. It's great. It's great gossip, isn't it? It does feel a little bit typical of things you tell me go on in Spain. So really, we can't read too much into it in terms of people's non-compliance. It's more of a case of like the admin behind this system is essentially defunct at this point, and essentially people that have been able to do business one way without problem are wondering why it's suddenly more of an issue today that they have to suddenly get a license number. I would find if I was in a tourist hotspot area, more of a short-term rental town, say like in the province of Andalusia, for example, which has got very, mass tourism is probably the biggest economic driver in Andalusia. Is that a fair comment? I think it probably is, right?
I think it's pretty big. Yeah, it's like tourism, and they call it the Garden of Europe as well. So.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, that's right, isn't it? Yeah, I've actually seen a bit of that. Yeah, I've seen a bit of that. Okay, so yeah, so you think like it's just for them, it just feels like, well, okay, it's another step of something I have to do, but really I'm just getting on with trying to run my business, right? Versus when you're in a spot that people would say there's like Barcelona, which is very politically contentious. So I imagine that non-compliance maybe slightly also blends along those lines too, right? If you're in a part of the world where it's not as front and center, you probably assume you're not going to get closed down, right? If you're in a town that wants short-term rental tourists, right?
Well, there's that. And then also what was cited in the article, and I've also been seeing on social media following this, a lot of people don't know that it's different from the license they already have. So a lot of people are like, well, I have a license. And because this isn't a license, it's just a registration. So it's not giving you the right to operate, but you have to have it or you're not going to be able to list on some of these platforms. So now it's a bit of it's a PR nightmare for them too. They just haven't put it out properly. And then I was also seeing on social media that, like, for me to register mine, it was pretty straightforward because I'm only doing one type of rental. But there are a lot of people who, for example, might rent by room to students 8 months out of the year, and then the rest of the time they rent the entire apartment either as a short-term rental or as a midterm rental. And this registry right now doesn't let you have a hybrid. So you can only register one property once. And you can't get multiple registry. Anyway, ain't nobody thought about this. Of course, it was written. You don't know anything about what's going on in the rental market. It's very
Yes,
clear.
it sounds like it's written by policymakers, not industry experts, and that's the first problem, isn't it? I guess you get into this point of, has the industry properly been consulted? If it had, I'm sure the people in Spain would be pro a light touch registration scheme, because why not? Like, if that's what's required to show that there are not epidemic levels of short-term rentals, but a very manageable level of short-term rentals countrywide. And you know what? If you want to start limiting that, then let's have a more progressive conversation about it once you've registered, what you understood fully, what type of properties and what type of properties, where they are, and how many of them there are. Ultimately, let's have that conversation once we've worked that out as a starting point. But it seems we can't even get to that starting point because of bureaucratic incompetence. So there we go. I think that's a really interesting one. Let's keep abreast of this one as the summer rolls on. It's also mid-peak, so I imagine if people are sort of, trying to log onto a website and not able to, and they say they're using their state one as well, they just haven't got time to engage with it. So interesting and slightly frustrating, as per usual. Okay, so I've got more of a traditional highlight. Sorry, Sarah, I feel like I'm setting Sarah for that because I made Sarah do the low light. Now I'm crashing it like she wanted to do it. I've got a more yeah, you can enjoy it, don't you? I've got a more traditional highlight. So we mentioned last week on the pod, we were very excited to talk about travel chapter, and I think we're rolling into it again because I think that it's significant that they have made a strategic expansion into lodges and glamping. Again, I said earlier, I finally feel seen because everybody knows I love a lodge in the wood type holiday. So yeah, they have launched 2 new brands that are, one is called Holiday Lodges.co.uk and the other is Glamping Stays. These additions to their portfolio are a direct response to increasing demand from both guests seeking unique experience-led accommodation and property owners and operators in the lodge and glamping sectors looking for tailored support. So it's great. It's 2 sides of the market speaking to one another, right? And I said this previously. We talked about what would I be doing if I was a property manager in the UK right now. I'd be finding the nearest bit of available woodland from where I'm already managing properties, and I would be trying to get some joint ventures going or planning permission to build on those areas, because the big issue at the moment in short-term rental is whether you want more or less short-term rentals in your town based on what other types of living arrangements you need to have there. So is there a shortage of houses? Is there not? Is there just a perceived shortage of houses and therefore you have to be careful about it? Where people are not trying to live in secluded woods. Generally speaking, that's not where mass populations need to be. So I see this as being a really, really interesting growth opportunity over the next 5 years. So I'm excited to see that Travel Chapter have also got wind of that. Actionable insights for accommodation providers. I can see this as being an opportunity if you do have a cabin to have eyeballs on it from a different type of guest. It's the same with the glamping sites. I think I mentioned to you, Sarah, a few weeks ago that we were glamping in the South Downs. Amazing, like really good service. And they charged us as much per night as you'd pay for a hotel, right? Like they are, and they really delivered on the service because, you are still in a tent, you're in a bell tent or a yurt or whatever you're in, but they have to go the extra mile on service. And this company certainly did up in the South Downs. So I think that's interesting as well. So the fact that they're seeing Travel Chapter seeing enough demand from lodge owners and glam site owners, and then the guests on the other side are wanting holidays like that they're seeing that there's the opportunity to create these 2 new brands. And I'll be honest, when I'm looking to go on holiday, it's the first thing I search is like cabin in the woods, right, or lodge in the woods, because it's just so good for the kids to be out running around and in the fresh air. So yeah, I think that's significant. What do you think, Sarah?
I love it. I love a nature stay, especially if it's more of a glamping / cabin vibe. I do like plumbing and electricity. But other than that, I love it. I love camping. I love hiking. And I also think it's great for our industry in general that we're seeing a lot more of this kind of innovation. It's like, okay, we're hitting our heads against a wall in every single city in Europe. Where else can we go? And again, I like it because it goes back to basics of what to me a vacation rental or short-term rental traditionally was. It was really only recently that we started seeing that. Recently, I'd say about 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, we started seeing kind of short-term rentals really being in cities. Historically, it was always like a holiday home or a house by the sea or in the woods or wherever that may be. So I think it's good to see that there's still demand for those types of holidays. And I also think it's a really unique opportunity for our industry in particular, because whenever you're going somewhere where it is more about nature, then it's a lot less about location, which means that you can kind of build it anywhere that it's easier to find land, easier to find properties. And it also means that we can really stand out in our industry by having these kind of unique stays, which is one of my favorite bits of short-term rentals and vacation rentals in general, is that every property is different. It's fine if you go to a city and you stay in a building where everything's the same, but that's got no charm. That's like a means to an end for me, and it's a hotel with a kitchen, you know? It's not a traditional like vacation rental. So I really like this. I think, yeah, we can really bring unique supply into the industry. And I would tend to agree with you, although in many places in Spain, the rules apply equally if you're in the middle of nowhere. In terms of like trying to buy a house or build on certain kinds of land and things like that. But it sounds like in the UK, things are a little bit more lax, I guess you could say, in terms of being able to do that. But I think, yeah, if there's like change of use and all that kind of stuff, I know here it's really complicated. But it sounds like in the UK, there's a lot of companies who are kind of moving more into this line of short-term rentals. So it seems a lot easier.
I think the UK is definitely more laissez-faire than the Spanish government, but that's not difficult, right? I don't think that in any way means the UK government is laissez-faire. But in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, so to speak. I think here I think what sometimes we lack in the UK sector, the UK government speaking to our sector, is this idea that if you build it, they will come, right? So it's the idea that you can pull tourists into the country, but you've got to work out where you want to pull them to. So again, that idea of like relaxing planning regulation around what you can do in certain woodlands, because I know, for example, that a lot of them have a stipulation that you can't have overnight visitors. The woods can just be used in the day, but not the evening, things like that. Now, what I think you can do to counter that is you can look at the ecological footprint of what you're doing. So you can make sure that people build structures that can also be put away and the wood be returned. So for me, it's more about the permanence of something. I wouldn't want to see like lodges getting built without the necessary look at what it would do to the footprint of a place. But you can do lots of, glamping's a great example because you just fold everything up at the end of the summer and then it's gone. And you can also build toilets and shower blocks and things like that can be returned back to whence they came, to return things to nature. As it's access to water is the key thing, right? But that can be piped in and that can be worked. But I think that's the key. We just need to think outside the box here and be imaginative, because we don't want to have especially in the UK, we don't want to have this Britain is not open for business mentality. It needs to be, okay, we feel like in some urban areas, maybe we have enough short-term rentals and enough hotels and the tourist mix is right. What can we do to inspire our European cousins to get in their camper vans, get on the ferry or get on the tunnel and come across and spend a week to 2 weeks in England? Well, you've got lots of woods there that could be utilized more, and build those experiences and they will come. So I certainly wouldn't say the UK is much better than the Spanish government, but I'm optimistic that there's enough people focused on the idea of growth and innovation that it will come. And then, as I say, as someone that's made their career in the short-term rental space, these opportunities, you should be in a good position to leverage them, because you've got the operational know-how if they're adjacent to a market that you already work in. So yeah, I would say at this point it's more of it's definitely in its infancy, but we are culturally, I think people are really demanding this type of stay. Plus the basic thing as well, very, very obvious thing to say, is the UK is getting hotter in summer as well. And the thing that put people off, certainly the glamping, not maybe cottages in the woods, lodges in the wood, but what puts people off camping is the rain and the cold. But as we get hotter, that all swings in, really, because camping is possibly the most wonderful weekend you can have if the sun's shining, and it fast becomes the worst weekend.
Yeah. I can imagine.
Sarah, take us on, my friend. Where are we going next?
Oh, well, we haven't talked about this enough, so we're going to give a nod to it, but we had to, because Airbnb put out a really interesting report on over-tourism. And essentially, yeah, kind of highlights of the paper, because it's, I think, 37 pages long. But kind of highlights are everything is really driving over tourism except short-term rentals, is of course their stance. But there were some really interesting points made in the paper itself. One of which I found something that nobody else is talking about when it relates to overtourism, which is, what if we restrict flights, the number of flights that can come into a certain destination on a certain day? And so one of the pieces of content, there was a whole like paragraph basically about how actually airline travel and arrivals to major cities. So they did 4 case studies in particular. One was like Paris, Amsterdam, Barcelona, and I forget the other one, where they dove into all of the potential causes of overtourism. Of course, they mentioned the cruise ships, which, you know, I'm all about demonizing. At least if we're going to talk about overtourism, right? Like, it's definitely a factor that nobody seems to consider. But the flights is one that I had never really thought about either. You know, the more flights that are arriving in a destination, it doesn't really matter if you have enough accommodation or if there's, you know, of course there's too many people. Like, you can limit how many people can see, let's say, Sagrada Familia or one of Gaudi's other buildings throughout the city, or the Picasso Museum, or anything you want, really. But if people are still arriving in the city, they're going to find something to do, even if it's not. It's kind of these classic tourist attraction. So that was an interesting one for me. There was also a section talking about the total nights stayed throughout Europe in general, but in particular in some of these major cities. And it was like 22% of the nights stayed were in short-term rentals. All the rest were in hotels. And so basically kind of putting the burden back on hotels of like, okay, if overtourism really is an issue, why are we not looking at hotels? Why are we not looking at transportation? Why are we not looking at all of these other things? And in fact, there's then a section on kind of local impact as well of short-term rentals, which we talk about on the pod all the time, which is the fact that hotels, if you're staying in a hotel, you want to be in the city center, and that's why you're willing to pay that price. But in an Airbnb, people are more willing to be in kind of the peripheral areas as long as it's well connected to public transit. And so basically how short-term rentals actually disperse tourism in a lot of these major cities outside of sort of the general hubs. So those are kind of the highlights that I drew from, but I don't know if you had anything else, or if you want to talk about one of those things.
Yeah, bits and bobs based on that. Bits and bobs. Got to sound English then, didn't I? Bits and bobs. Apologies, American listeners.
Bits and bobs.
It's bits and bobs from that, darling. Okay, so bits and bobs, I would say. The idea that actually we go back to the headline. It's very complex, right? It's very tough. So there needs to be some fairly like hands-on city management and planning that happens here, not just demonization. So let's cut the crap and let's not throwing mud at each other. Hotels, short-term rentals, cruise ships. Like, ultimately, let's collectively lobby to ensure that there is proper consultation with stakeholders and local city managers, because ultimately the cities belong to the residents, you know, they do. But I think there's a lot more complexity here. So what I like, ever the optimist, what I like the idea of that potentially one of those planning sessions tells you that, and I think the city of Bruges did this, where they stopped allowing short-term rental licenses and new hotel development in the historic centre of Bruges, right? Yeah. Beautiful little city. We're actually going there in the summer. We're staying 20 minutes outside in a tourist seaside town called De Haan, and then we'll drive in, we'll get the train in. So, you know, that's how they want people to behave in Bruges, right? They've got like towns for tourists, purpose-built accommodation, and then you get to drive into the historic centre. And they've made that decision, and what does it do? It can, as you said, it disperses the Airbnbs, the short-term rentals, because suddenly wherever you make your zone of no short-term rentals for a while you're, I know, allowing, or no accommodation, let's say accommodation generally for a while you're allowing things to catch up or settle down, you suddenly do create new zones where the people want to go and stay in. And that again is the credit to the short-term rental industry, that you don't, it's very, very quick then. When you open up a new zone, and the mayor of Porto has been doing it for years, we've been talking about it for years, you know, the idea, okay, this part of my city is a little bit economically backwards versus this neighborhood. So we're going to sort of remove any new short-term rental licenses in this neighborhood, and we're going to try and stimulate economic growth in this neighborhood. That's a lot easier to do as a first instrument versus building lots of hotels. And you kind of can allow that process to begin. Places like Portugal are a really good example. There was not a whole lot of hotel building going on in Portugal, and then Portugal has become It's now slightly slipping, but it was like the darling of Europe in terms of everybody going to stay there from outside of inside of Europe. And you know what helped drive that? Airbnb, short-term rental, Vrbo, Booking.com bookings, right? So
Yeah.
We can't just be a simple friend or foe. The answer is much more complex than that. So when the city needs that development and is striving for that growth, it's a really good, quick way of bringing tourists in. But then if you have what you would consider over tourism, then potentially you do need to look at measures of how you react to that based on the city that you are trying to build. So for me, I think the disbursement element of what you said is the most interesting because it's the most easy to execute on. And again, let's stop telling half truths. Let's tell the whole story, right? Which is that there is a growing cohort. There's a rising middle class in China and India that want to come to Europe on holiday. Why? Because Europe is incredible. It's an incredible place to go on holiday. But as a consequence, you do need to think about, I've said this before, but man, I love it if this became common parlance. Let's think about it's the osmosis effect, right? You can't have all your tourists walking down the Ramblas. You need to have people in Girona. You need to have people in seaside towns in Costa Brava. That's that example. If you're in Athens, you can't just be in Athens. You need to be on the outer areas of it and stimulate growth because, the economy of Europe is a lot of it's largely built on tourism, but there's still lots of parts of Europe that are economically further back than the tourism hotspots that would welcome the arrivals and would welcome the visitors. So let's try and tell the whole story of what Europe has to offer. Last week we focused on the train article. We talked about how direct marketing organizations that are further back in Europe, this is how good they are in America, could be doing more to sell the virtues of towns that are less obviously traveled to, less regularly traveled to. And lots of people like finding the road less traveled. They don't want to be in a crowd in a big city. They want to be driven somewhere else. So let's use our best marketing efforts to get them there. And again, what will help catch that trend quickly, short-term rentals, because it doesn't require a whole load of planning to build a big hotel. That was a rant, wasn't it? That was a real rant.
It was a rant, but you touched on something that I think is also worth mentioning, which was cited as well in this report, which was that short-term rentals are able to expand the supply to meet demand, and they tend to do that when there is the highest demand. So, for example, it might be really typical. You go away, or maybe you are going away for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. You might put that property on Airbnb as long as you're allowed to in some of these major cities. And so that supply can expand without actually taking away a long-term housing option. So it was also another kind of nod in favor of Airbnbs. Whereas with a hotel, like you build that hotel and it is there all year round, whether you got people or not. So I think the elasticity of the short-term rental supply to rise to meet demand at different points in the year is also worth noting for our industry.
The elasticity point. Well said. Well, actually hard to say. I nearly almost messed that word up. Okay, quickly, look, we've got to do this. We've got a headline finish with this because I can't resist talking about it. We're going to go into this more, I think, over the coming weeks, but just as a precursor, bit of news that caught both our eyes this week was the fact that Instagram and Google have integrated. So there's a partnership here. The article itself is talking about how this could potentially be game-changing for travel marketing. Sarah, it's something you and I talk about a lot, is the idea that people are using Instagram to tell the story of their brand, whether it be a short-term rental provider in Greece, for example, using it to talk about different wonderful things that are in their town, the top 10 things you must see, or the history of this town, not just showing properties that they manage on their Instagram feed. So brand story, brand building. Up to now, to this point, Instagram had always been, as the article is calling it, a walled garden as a social platform. But now, through this partnership, there will be, for certain professional accounts, Google will be indexing the content. So what does that mean for these professional accounts? Well, it means suddenly that your content is searchable, and the things that you are producing can help drive, complement, and essentially merge with your SEO strategy. It's great. I think it's really, really cool. It's definitely a reaction from Google of how younger people are using the internet and browsing, and lots of Gen Z will go to Instagram, TikTok to do their searching for things. So I think it is it's a good example of them reacting to that, desperately trying to index some of this so they can pull people into that more traditional search environment. But again, for a brand, if you are really good on Instagram, you've essentially now been building up to something which hopefully has more reason to drive people, you'd imagine, into direct bookings, because suddenly it feels more legitimate if it's indexed and you're suddenly being pulled through a search on Google. That might then link back to a direct booking website. So I think it definitely favors our industry if you are somebody who is investing in content, and I can think lots of examples of property managers that do. So we'll talk about it more over the coming weeks, but I just had to mention it as a headline. Quickly, your thoughts?
Yeah, I loved this one. I actually have a problem. Maybe it's because I'm old, but whenever I try and search for something on Instagram, I can't find what I'm looking for. So I end up leaving Instagram to go to Google to find something on Instagram. So I'm actually hoping that this partnership works obviously for travel, it's a game changer, and especially for direct bookings, just as you mentioned. And that doesn't just mean for property managers, that can mean for individual hosts as well, where now they have a platform where if it's going to be properly indexed and they have this partnership where they can, I guess I need to figure out a little bit more about exactly how it works. And like, do you have to pay for that? Is Google going to tell you how to SEO optimize your content or not? Or is it going to only be if you pay for a certain kind of service or a certain package? But if so, it could absolutely democratize bookings, and especially direct bookings, and in particular for the little guys. So I found this one great. And also I hope it overall improves the search engine on the Instagram, because it's not good.
Yeah, I agree. So essentially what we're really saying is it's going to help millennials use the internet better. And God knows we need that.
Be more cool. Yeah, I'm just going to help me find content that I actually want to see rather than, yeah. Let's hope.
There you go. All right, gang, that's a really good place to finish. We will revisit this, I'm sure, when we're talking about marketing, brand building. Guys, it's midsummer. I hope you're all, surviving it out there. It's hot. It's hot. Not everywhere, but it's certainly hot next to a fan in Barcelona. Let us know how you're getting on. Interact with us on social media. We had a great reaction to some of the posts we did last week. We're keen to hear how summer's going for you and your experiences of things over there in Europe. Sarah, close us out, buddy.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have enjoyed this episode, please hit like, share, subscribe in all the usual social places. Engage with us on LinkedIn or on other social media. I'm mostly a LinkedIn gal. And we will see you all next week. Thank you.
And as we know, we're now going to be able to use Instagram much better. So engage with us there too.
Engage with us on Instagram. We'll try. I'll see if I remember how to open the messages. I found out a couple of weeks ago there's messages on Instagram. So that's where we're at.
Audience, lower your expectations. All right. Thanks, gang.